She doesn't understand anyway. And honestly, it's none of her business. I earn the money I pay and I decide. She just lives and enjoys what I provide. The words, sharp and dismissive, sliced through the air, landing not in her ears, but directly in the hollow of Kaylee's chest, where a fragile hope had stubbornly clung for 15 years. Her knuckles, white and rigid, pressed against the delicate porcelain of the coffee cup, threatening to crack it, just as her composure felt about to shatter. Silas Thorne. Her husband had just delivered a brutal verdict on her worth, her existence. Her very understanding, utterly unaware that his contemptuous pronouncements, uttered in fluent German to the apartment seller, Herr Albrecht Richter, had been understood every damning syllable. The scent of brewing coffee still clung to Kaylee's clothes, a bitter reminder of the morning's deception. She closed the bedroom door, the click echoing in the sudden silence of their small apartment. From beneath a stack of neatly folded linens, she retrieved a worn German textbook, its pages fanning open to reveal a mosaic of her precise handwriting and a scattering of vibrant bookmarks. The dim glow of her desk lamp, carefully angled to prevent any betraying light from seeping under the door, illuminated her exercise notebook. In the living room, the television's roar confirmed Silas's absorption in another football game, granting Kaylee her customary 2 hours of uninterrupted solitude. This clandestine ritual had been her nightly companion for 8 months. While Silas worked late or immersed himself in his solitary pursuits, Kaylee would delve into the intricate grammar and lyrical phonetics of a foreign tongue. It had begun innocently, a fleeting online advertisement for free language courses, sparking a dormant curiosity. But quickly it evolved into something more profound. The thrill of deciphering a new language, the satisfying click of comprehension as words coalesced into meaning, felt like solving an intricate puzzle, one far more exhilarating than any she had encountered before. But Silas knew nothing of it. He wouldn't have understood, or worse, he would have scoffed. 2 years prior, her fleeting passion for floral design classes had been met with a dismissive wave of his hand and a chuckle that still stung. "Kaylee, you realize that's not a serious thing, right?" He'd said, his gaze fixed on his tablet, his voice laced with patronizing amusement. "You'll waste money, go for a month, and quit just like always. Just like always." The phrase had lodged itself in her memory, a barb she hadn't been allowed to parry. "I just want to try something new," she'd attempted. "New?" He'd scoffed, a dry, rasping sound. "You have a new hobby every month. First yoga, then painting, then some other nonsense. You'd be better off taking care of the house properly." She had retreated then, the resentment settling deep, a pebble in her shoe. 6 months later, when the idea of yoga classes resurfaced, he hadn't even let her finish the sentence. "We don't have money for nonsense," he'd declared, citing utility bills and mortgage payments, as if they were insurmountable obstacles solely his burden. Since then, Kaylee had learned to guard her aspirations, to keep her desires close, unspoken. Why share them if they were to be met only with ridicule and dismissal? She had become, in her own home, a ghost. Silas orchestrated their vacations, dictated their furniture choices, scheduled their social engagements. Kaylee cooked, cleaned, agreed, and occasionally attempted a tentative objection, only to be met with his unwavering refrain, "I know better. You don't understand these things. Let me handle it." Slowly, inexorably, she had receded into the shadows of her own life. Now she poured tea from a small thermos she kept hidden in the bedroom. A simple act of defiance against the need to venture into the kitchen and risk discovery. Settling onto the bed, she immersed herself in her exercises, mouthing the words in a barely audible whisper, her headphones muffling her attempts to the outside world, yet amplifying her own voice through a pronunciation app. This secret world, this private knowledge, was hers alone. Silas didn't know it couldn't control it. It was a fragile sliver of freedom in a life that had long ceased to feel like her own. A little over an hour later, The guttural roar of a commentator pierced the quiet. A touchdown, no doubt. Kaylee paused, listening. Silas's excited shouts followed, punctuated by a booming laugh. He was on the phone, probably with Dominic Sterling, his closest friend. A hollow ache settled in her chest. It had been so long since he'd laughed like that with her. She sighed, returning to her textbook, pushing back the familiar tide of sadness that threatened to engulf her whenever she contemplated the slow, agonizing erosion of their marriage. 15 years ago, everything had been vibrant, brimming with shared dreams. Silas, then a budding entrepreneur, had been attentive, genuinely interested in her opinions. They'd walked hand in hand through twilight streets, sketching out Future's children, a grand house, their laughter echoing like bells. He'd called her his sunshine, assured her she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Kaylee had believed him utterly, completely. She had found happiness in simply existing beside him, supporting his ambitions, listening to his dreams, but with success came a hardening. As his business thrived, Silas grew more self-assured, more rigid. His growing income seemed to grant him unilateral dominion over their shared life. Kaylee, an accountant at a small firm, earned a modest salary enough only for groceries and her personal indulgences. Silas never missed an opportunity to remind her of his indispensable role as provider, the one who paid the mortgage, the car notes, the vacations. If not for me, where would you be? He'd often ask during their increasingly frequent arguments. In a rented studio with 3 roommates, that's where Kaylee would fall silent, a deep-seated fear confirming his words. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps without him she would falter, prove herself too weak, too indecisive, too utterly ordinary. Children had never come. Early on, they'd postponed the idea, prioritizing careers, the mortgage renovations. Then, inexplicably, it just didn't happen. Doctors had shrugged, baffled, confirming no apparent issues in either of them. But after a year of agonizing tests and procedures, hope had dwindled, the topic becoming a painful chasm between them. Kaylee secretly yearned for a child, imagining bedtime stories, first steps, the tender weight of a baby in her arms. But she dared not voice it, fearing Silas's cutting words, his implied blame. His reminder of her perceived inability to even accomplish this one fundamental thing. In recent months, the chasm had widened into an unbridgeable gulf. He stayed late at work, more often returning home, late, exhausted, irritable. Dinners were punctuated by his monosyllabic grunts, his gaze lost in the glow of his phone screen. Kaylee tried endlessly. She asked about his day, shared anecdotes from her own even attempted jokes. He'd nod, unlistening, before retreating to the living room and the television. Weekends meant fishing trips with Dominic or hours spent in the garage. She made his favorite dishes, her signature smothered pork chops, creamy mashed potatoes, cornbread, hoping to entice him to bridge the distance. She suggested movies, books, and anything to rekindle their connection. I'm tired, Kaylee. It snapped his voice weak. Let me rest, for God's sake. You don't understand what it's like to grind all week, and then have to go to bed and entertain her. And she would retreat, washing dishes, cleaning the silent apartment, watching passers-by from the window. Why had it all gone so terribly wrong? At what point had they become strangers, sharing a roof? She felt him slipping away, or perhaps already lost. Yet she couldn't surrender, couldn't admit that 15 years had dissolved into nothing, that their love was a phantom, that she was truly, utterly alone. So when Silas unexpectedly suggested they search for a larger apartment, their cramped one-bedroom on the city's outskirts, long overdue for an upgrade, Kaylee felt a flicker of hope. A chance, perhaps. A joint project, a common goal might just reconnect them, might resurrect what they had lost. A new condo, a new beginning. Perhaps, just perhaps, everything would work out. They began browsing listings, or rather Silas browsed tablet clutched in his hand, while Kaylee sat beside him on the sofa, nodding dutifully. He'd flash options, and she'd tentatively offer an opinion. A layout, she liked the angle of the windows, the convenience of a kitchen. His responses were swift, dismissive. Too far from the metro, he'd wave off. Too expensive, out of our budget. Bad neighborhood, nothing but trouble. Do you even understand this stuff? Eventually, Kaylee stopped arguing, content to sit in silence, her gaze fixed on the screen, her thoughts wandering to her own private world. Weeks bled into a month. Weekend viewings, initially approached with enthusiasm, grew increasingly resigned. Always something was amiss. An awkward layout, noisy neighbors, an aging building, insufficient parking, or an exorbitant price. Silas remained perpetually dissatisfied, nitpicking every minor flaw, arguing with realtors. Kaylee, tired of the endless parade, his constant irritation, the pervasive sense of futility. Sometimes she suspected he deliberately sought imperfections, intentionally prolonging the search. But why? She couldn't fathom it. One evening, as Kaylee meticulously practiced another grammar exercise, Silas burst into the bedroom. He didn't knock, simply flung the door open. Kaylee flinched, her heart hammering, barely managing to slam her notebook shut and shove it beneath her pillow. Had he noticed? Kaylee, look. He thrust his phone at her, oblivious to her sudden panic. This is the one. 3 bedrooms, 1,200 square feet. Good neighborhood, acceptable price. Some German fellow is selling it. We're going to see it tomorrow. Kaylee caught her breath. He hadn't noticed. She took the phone, scanning the listing. The condo was indeed stunning, bright, high-ceilinged rooms, a spacious kitchen, 2 bathrooms, a glass-enclosed balcony. The professional photographs showcased gleaming hardwood floors, freshly painted walls, solid, well-maintained furniture. It's beautiful, she ventured cautiously, her eyes lingering on the images. Why is he selling? He's returning to his home country. It says right there. Silas snatched the phone back, as if she'd held it too long. Lived here for several years for work. Contract ended. He's going back. I already contacted him. Agreed on tomorrow at 11 in the morning. Will you go? Of course I'll go, Kaylee replied. Good. I hope this works out. I'm tired of running around every weekend. He stretched, a loud yawn escaping him. All right. I'm going to finish the game. Why are you sitting in here? Just reading a little before bed. Uh-huh. He was already turning away. Just don't stay up too late. We have to get up early tomorrow. He left, closing the door, and Kaylee remained on the bed, staring into the void. A German, a foreigner. A spark ignited within her. She pulled her notebook back from beneath the pillow, flipping to the last page filled with new words and expressions. Her proficiency was already substantial. She could navigate simple texts, follow movie dialogue without subtitles, even compose short practice notes. Her online instructor lauded her progress, praising her pronunciation and innate feel for the language. What if the thought, sudden and audacious, was both terrifying and tantalizing? What if at the viewing she remained silent, feigning ignorance of German? Silas would undoubtedly converse with Herr Richter in his native tongue. Her husband frequently boasted of improving his conversational German during business trips to Berlin and Munich, signing contracts with partners there. And she, Kaylee, would be privy to every word, every nuance, everything Silas might choose to withhold. Why did she need this? Kaylee couldn't fully articulate the question yet. An insistent internal whisper, a vague unease, a nascent intuition told her it was imperative. Perhaps she wanted to test his honesty, to finally hear the unvarnished truth, unfiltered by his interpretations. Or perhaps she simply yearned to wield her secret knowledge, if only once to feel less helpless, less invisible than he believed her to be. She went to bed, but sleep remained elusive. Silas snored beside her, sprawled across 3/4 of the mattress, leaving Kaylee to cling to the precarious edge, afraid to move to disturb him. A sleep-deprived Silas was an irritable Silas. She stared into the darkness tomorrow, heavy in her mind. A strange cocktail of excitement and anxiety churned within her. What would she hear? And was she truly ready for it? What if it proved to be something irrevocably terrible? Something that would prevent any return to her former life. But my former life is already unbearable anyway. She thought, a cold clarity settling over her. What could be worse than feeling unwanted, invisible, useless every single day? They departed early the next morning. The condo lay across the city in a newly developed, prestigious district. In the car, Silas drove in concentrated silence. His usual commentary limited to grumbling about traffic and the incompetence of other drivers. Kaylee gazed out the window, rehearsing potential conversations in her mind, a knot of fear tightening in her stomach. What if she failed to understand the live, rapid-fire dialogue? What if she faltered, gave herself away with an accidental word or an unguarded glance? What if this was all a foolish, self-destructive idea? "Why are you so pensive?" Silas asked, abruptly glancing at her at a traffic light. "Your face is sour. Don't like the apartment already?" "No, I like it," Kaylee replied too quickly. "I'm just thinking, what if something goes wrong again? Don't stress yourself out. It's a good option. I checked everything, the documents, the history of the condo. It's all clean." He paused, then added a hint of condescension in his voice. "Don't worry. If anything, I'll translate everything. You understand? With foreigners, you have to be careful. They might try to scam us. These Europeans are tricky. They think we're all suckers here." Kaylee clasped her hands tightly on her knees, biting back a bitter retort. "You'll translate," she thought. "The question is what exactly you'll translate, and what you'll conveniently omit." They parked in front of a modern high-rise, its glass facade glinting in the morning sun. The lobby was impeccably clean. A concierge behind a polished counter, an efficient intercom system, discreet surveillance cameras. On every floor, plush leather sofas and abstract paintings adorned the hallways. The air carried the subtle, expensive fragrance of a bespoke freshener. Silas looked around, a smug satisfaction on his face. Not a bad place. Promising. The price will definitely go up. The whole area is being built up with luxury housing, a profitable investment. Kaylee remained silent. The elevator, swift and silent with mirrored walls, whisked them up to the 12th floor. She caught her reflection. A pale face, tense lips, hands nervously clutching her purse strap. She looked terrified. Pull yourself together, she thought. Act calm, natural. Just keep quiet and listen. Just be yourself. The quiet, invisible saint who never interferes in anything. The doors parted. They walked down a carpeted corridor, Silas checking the apartment number on his phone, before stopping at the correct door. Kaylee's heart pounded a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. It was starting. Now she had to perform, to pretend to remain silent. Could she manage it? Would an accidental word, a telltale glance betray her? Silas rang the bell. Footsteps approached from within, confident, unhurried. Kaylee took a deep breath, willing herself to calm down. Everything will be fine, she told herself. You'll just listen, just learn the truth. There's nothing wrong with that. The lock clicked and the door opened slowly. On the threshold stood a man in his late 50s, tall and fit, with neatly coiffed grey hair and shrewd, attentive grey eyes. Dressed in a crisp light shirt and dark trousers, he exuded an aura of understated elegance and welcome. He smiled, extending a hand to Silas. Albrecht Richter. He introduced himself, a faint accent softening the edges of his English. He then seamlessly transitioned into German, clearly recognizing Silas's fluency. Kaylee tensed her every nerve alight, but forced a placid expression. She understood every word. The polite greeting, the invitation to enter, the slight apology for an imagined untidiness in an already pristine apartment. Silas replied in kind, briskly and confidently introducing himself, then waved a careless hand in her direction. "This is my wife, Kaylee. She doesn't speak your language, so I'll translate." Herr Richter turned to her, his smile gentle, extending his hand. Kaylee shook it, offered a brief, shy smile in return, and lowered her gaze, perfecting her portrayal of demure confusion. Inside, a tight knot of tension coiled tighter. It had begun. Now she was not a participant, merely an invisible woman understanding nothing. "Please come in." Herr Richter opened the door wider, stepping aside. They entered a spacious hallway. Kaylee's eyes swept over the light wood flooring, the built-in closet, stretching the length of the wall, the ornate mirror, the soft, diffused light from ceiling fixtures. It smelled of cleanliness and a faint lingering aroma of high-quality coffee. Herr Richter led them into the living room, and Kaylee involuntarily gasped a small, soundless intake of breath. The room was vast, with panoramic windows, offering a breathtaking vista of the city park and a distant glimmer of the river. The furniture, modern yet inviting, consisted of a large grey sectional sofa, a glass and wood coffee table, and bookshelves crammed with books and souvenirs. "Beautiful," she murmured in English, unable to resist. Silas casually translated for Herr Richter, adding a flourish of his own. Kaylee listened intently, catching his precise words. "My wife is impressed, but we'll still see if it's worth the money." Herr Richter chuckled, nodded agreeably, and began the tour. They moved slowly through the apartment. The master bedroom with its grand bed and walk-in closet. The smaller second bedroom Herr Richter used as an office. The sleek studio kitchen equipped with state-of-the-art appliances and marble countertops. Herr Richter offered details about the apartment, the building, the neighborhood. Silas translated in snatches, but Kaylee immediately noticed the omissions, the subtle shifts in emphasis. When Herr Richter praised the building's efficient management, Silas translated it as, "The management company is so-so but tolerable." When the owner spoke of quiet, cultured neighbors, professors, doctors, business owners, Silas grunted to Kaylee. "Neighbors are regular folks, haven't had any problems." Kaylee remained silent, pretending to examine the finishes, the furniture, the views from the windows. But a bewildered unease grew within her. Why was Silas distorting Herr Richter's words? Why downplay the apartment's virtues? Perhaps, she reasoned, he merely intended to drive down the price to feign disinterest. They returned to the living room. Herr Richter offered coffee, and Silas accepted. Kaylee sat on the edge of the sofa, hands folded demurely in her lap, striving for invisibility. Herr Richter retreated to the kitchen, the soft whir of a coffee machine and the clinking of cups drifting back. Silas paced the room, perusing the spines of books on the shelves, examining framed photographs. "Well, do you like it?" he asked Kaylee in English without turning around. "Very much," she answered truthfully. "The apartment is wonderful." "Yeah, not bad." He scratched his chin. "Though the price is inflated. We'll have to haggle." Kaylee wanted to interject, but held her tongue. Herr Richter returned with a tray bearing 3 cups of aromatic coffee and a plate of shortbread cookies. He placed it on the coffee table and settled into the armchair opposite them. Kaylee took a cup, offering a silent nod of thanks. The coffee was strong, authentic, not instant. Herr Richter then spoke again, his tone more serious this time. Kaylee listened, every nerve stretched taut. He explained that he had lived in the apartment for 3 years, loved the place dearly, but his contract with a local firm had concluded, necessitating his return home to his family. His wife and adult children he shared had remained in Germany and missed him. He spoke warmly, a touch of sadness in his voice, expressing regret at leaving the apartment, but acknowledging the lack of choice. Silas listened, nodded, then translated succinctly for Kaylee. Says he's leaving for work. Contract ended. Kaylee frowned internally. Why had he omitted the detail about Herr Richter's family? His palpable sadness at leaving these humanizing details would have made the owner more relatable, yet Silas had deemed them unnecessary. The conversation then shifted to the transaction details. Herr Richter named a price high but fair for such a condo in such a desirable neighborhood. Silas frowned, shaking his head. Too expensive, he muttered to Kaylee in English, then turned back, launching into a forceful negotiation with Herr Richter. Kaylee observed their exchange. Silas was assertive, citing market instability, dropping prices, and the existence of cheaper alternatives. Herr Richter countered politely but firmly the apartment was in excellent condition. The area prestigious, all documents pristine, and immediate occupancy was possible after closing. Silas held his ground, offering a price 20% lower. Herr Richter shook his head, deeming the discount excessive, impossible to accept. Kaylee sat clutching her coffee cup, feeling utterly superfluous, as if she weren't even there, as if this weren't her potential future home, her life. She was merely a decoration, a voiceless extra in a play with pre-assigned roles. The haggling continued for 20 minutes. Finally, they reached a compromise, a price slightly lower than the initial asking, but not so much that Herr Richter would incur a significant loss. The men shook hands, satisfied. Silas broke into a wide smile. Agreed, he told Kaylee. Got a good discount. See how you have to talk to them. They soften up immediately when they feel you're not a sucker. Kaylee offered a weak, tight smile in response. Herr Richter spoke again, and Kaylee perked up, listening intently. He proposed discussing the details, closing date, required documents, optimal contract drafting. Silas nodded, agreeing that everything needed thorough discussion. You understand? Herr Richter began addressing Silas, and Kaylee froze. Deals like this are better structured simply. Less paperwork, less tax implication in my country. I can help with the documents. I have a notary contact. He'll do everything quickly and cleanly. Silas leaned forward, intrigued. What do you propose? Well, for example, Herr Richter spoke calmly as if discussing the weather. You can put everything in one owner's name. It's simpler with the bank, with the filings. You can sort it out within the family later if you need to add the wife. I did it that way with my real estate here. First, everything in my name. Then I quietly distributed the shares later, convenient and beneficial. Kaylee felt an icy dread spread through her. She gripped the cup so hard her knuckles turned white. Put it in one owner's name, in Silas's name without her. Silas remained silent, weighing the suggestion. Then he slowly nodded. Sounds reasonable indeed. Why complicate things? I'll think about it. Of course it's up to you to decide. Herr Richter spread his hands. I'm just sharing experience. You have time to think. I can send the notary's contact info. He'll explain in more detail if you're interested. Yes, send it, please. Kaylee sat motionless, striving to betray no emotion. A tempest raged within her. Silas had said nothing, translated nothing of this conversation to her. He'd pretended it was unimportant, continuing to chat amicably with Herr Richter about renovations, furniture. What would stay, what would go. She looked at her husband, at his confident face, at his casual posture on the sofa, gesturing as he spoke. He looked pleased, relaxed, while she sat beside him, the ground dissolving beneath her feet. Did he truly intend to title the apartment solely in his name? Did he truly mean to hide this from her? To then claim it was simpler that way, that they would add her later, and then just forget? Or worse, deliberately neglect to add her, leaving her utterly dependent, utterly bereft? Thoughts swirled, each more terrifying than the last. Perhaps she was exaggerating. Perhaps he did intend to complete the paperwork properly later, merely seeking to simplify the initial procedure. But if so, why the secrecy? Why not discuss it with her? Why conceal this crucial exchange? She bit her lip, fighting back tears. Not here, not now. She had to maintain her composure, endure the rest of this meeting. And then she didn't know what would happen then. The conversation continued for another 40 minutes. They discussed the schedule for the independent appraiser document verification, move-out dates. Herr Richter remained professional and benevolent. Silas was assertive, all business. Kaylee sat silently, mechanically finishing her cold coffee, an icy void expanding within her with every passing minute. The men moved on to discuss the terms of the preliminary agreement. Herr Richter opened a laptop, displaying a standard form. They bent over the screen, discussing details. Silas asked questions Herr Richter answered. Kaylee watched them from the side. Two men deciding important matters. She merely a part of the interior, a voiceless shadow. At some point, Herr Richter looked up, his grey eyes, piercing, scrutinizing her. Kaylee lowered her gaze but felt his continued observation. Then he turned back to Silas and uttered a phrase that caused Kaylee's breath to hitch a sudden, sharp intake of air. "She doesn't know that the documents will be drafted only in your name, does she?" he asked quietly, distinctly. "Do I understand correctly?" Time itself seemed to stop. Kaylee sat breathless, motionless, staring into the emptiness before her. Inside, something irrevocably snapped. Silas, however, showed no embarrassment. He didn't even flinch. He merely chuckled, shaking his head. "What difference does it make?" he said in German, casually waving his hand. "She doesn't understand anyway. And honestly, it's none of her business. I earn the money I pay and I decide. She just lives and enjoys what I provide. So it's all good. Don't worry." Herr Richter nodded, but a flicker of doubt, perhaps even disapproval, crossed his face. Nevertheless, he remained silent, returning his attention to the laptop screen. Kaylee remained motionless, but inside a furious storm raged. Shock, pain, rage, despair. All coalesced into a suffocating knot in her throat, making it difficult to breathe. She doesn't understand. None of her business, just lives and enjoys. This was how he perceived her. This was his true regard for her. Not a wife, not a partner, not even a human being, but a mere pet, to be fed and walked without a voice, without a right to an opinion. 15 years of marriage. 15 years she had cooked his meals, laundered his clothes, cleaned their home, supported his endeavors, tolerated his moods, his neglect, his condescension. 15 years she had hoped he would change, that things would improve, that they would reconnect. And he hadn't even considered it necessary to inform her that the condo, their shared condo, would be titled solely to him. She gritted her teeth, her jaw aching, but maintained her composure. She continued to sit quietly, submissively, unnoticed, precisely as he expected, as he had grown accustomed to. The meeting concluded. Silas and Herr Richter exchanged numbers, agreeing to speak in a few days, to coordinate the next meeting with the notary. Herr Richter, ever polite and courteous, escorted them to the door, shook Silas's hand once more, and offered Kaylee a warm, if slightly knowing, smile. They descended in the elevator in silence. Silas hummed softly under his breath, clearly pleased with himself. They stepped out onto the street. The sun shone brightly, casting long, cheerful shadows. It was a warm, fresh spring day. People strolled along the paths, children played on a nearby playground. An ordinary day, ordinary life. Kaylee walked beside her husband, feeling as if she had fallen into some surreal, parallel reality. Everything around her looked normal, yet a silent, devastating hurricane raged within. They entered the car. Silas started the engine, tuned the radio to some upbeat pop music. "Well, Kaylee, nice place, right?" he asked, pulling out of the parking lot. "I told you we'd find a decent option. This German turned out to be reasonable. Not like those cheapskates we saw before. Dropped the price without a problem. I did good, didn't I?" Kaylee looked out the window. Inside, she seethed, yet her voice, when it came, was calm, almost indifferent. "Yes, nice apartment." See? Silas tapped his fingers on the steering wheel in time with the music. In a week, we'll sign the prelim, put down the deposit, and it's in the bag. In a month and a half or two, we'll move in. You can start planning renovations if you want to change anything. Although everything looks excellent there anyway, I think. Was all Kaylee could manage. Silas noticed nothing. He continued to chatter about the condo, about how fortunately everything was working out, how glad he was that this issue would finally be resolved. Kaylee listened with half an ear, her mind replaying those phrases from Herr Richter's apartment. Documents will be drafted only in your name. She doesn't understand. None of her business. She just lives and enjoys what I provide. Every word cut like a knife. She had lived, herself, in an illusion for so many years that they were a family, that they were together, that he cared about her. And he had simply kept her around like a convenient housekeeper, one who didn't object, didn't demand, didn't interfere. Nausea surged in her throat. She closed her eyes, fighting for composure. Can't cry now. Can't show weakness. Need to think. Need to decide what to do next. They arrived home. Silas immediately slumped onto the sofa, grabbing the remote. Kaylee walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water and drank it in one gulp. Her hands trembled. She placed the empty glass in the sink and leaned against the countertop, staring out at the grey courtyards of their neighbourhood. A landscape that suddenly felt utterly alien. What now? What can she do? If she confronted him directly about titling the apartment solely in his name, he would undoubtedly conjure a plausible explanation. He'd claim it's simplified taxes, that he'd transfer her ownership later, that she simply didn't grasp such matters, and that she shouldn't worry her pretty head. And she, in her fear and her desperate need to believe, would likely accept it. It was terrifying to admit that the man she had spent half her life with was not the person she thought he was. But now she knew the truth. She had heard his words, his tone, his raw contempt. She doesn't understand. He hadn't even bothered to conceal his disdain, utterly convinced she wouldn't hear, wouldn't comprehend, wouldn't ever find out. Kaylee straightened a steel rod, replacing the trembling uncertainty in her spine. No. Enough. Enough of being convenient, quiet, submissive. Enough of averting her eyes from the truth, clinging to the futile hope that everything would magically resolve itself. She walked back into the living room. Silas was engrossed in a talk show, chuckling at the host's jokes. Kaylee stopped in the doorway, observing him. This man, her husband, intended to deceive her, to strip her of security, to leave her vulnerable and dependent. And he believed she would never even discover his scheme. Silas. She called out, her voice surprisingly steady. He didn't glance away from the screen. I need to talk to you later, Kaylee. Can't you see I'm busy? In the past, she would have retreated, walked away, deferred the conversation. Not now. Not today. No. He turned his head slowly, looking at her with an expression of mild surprise. There was a new, unfamiliar firmness in her voice, a tone he had likely never heard from her. Why are you getting worked up? He frowned. Did something happen? Something happened. Kaylee took a step into the room. Tell me, whose name are you planning to put the deed in? He blinked, clearly blindsided. In both of ours, naturally. Why? He lied to her face, a casual, practiced deception. What are you even talking about? Kaylee met his gaze directly. Her heart pounded, threatening to burst from her chest. It was terrifying to confront him, to hold her ground, to demand the truth. But the line had been crossed. There was no turning back. Herr Richter suggested you put everything in one owner's name, in your name, and you agreed. Silas's face twitched, his eyes narrowing. How do you... He stumbled, his confident facade crumbling. Were you eavesdropping? I heard your conversation, but you don't understand. He cut himself off, and Kaylee watched almost clinically as comprehension dawned, a slow, chilling dawning. Don't understand? She chuckled. A short, bitter sound, devoid of mirth. Are you so sure about that? Silence descended thick and suffocating. Silas stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Then slowly he rose from the sofa. You know the language. Disbelief laced with confusion coloured his voice. Kaylee didn't answer, merely stood watching him waiting. Silas ran a hand over his face as if to clear his thoughts. Then he took a sharp step towards her. How long, he asked harshly. How long have you known the language? What difference does it make? Kaylee instinctively stepped back but held her ground. What matters is something else. You intended to deceive me. What deception? He raised his voice and she flinched but remained rooted. I wanted to simplify the procedure. Then I would have added you to the title. Everything would have been fine. Then she repeated quietly, her voice trembling. Or maybe you wouldn't have added me. Maybe you would have left everything in your name. Convenient, right? I completely depend on you. Can't go anywhere. What are you even talking about? Silas threw up his hands in exasperation. I slaved away for you for 15 years, provided for you, and now you accuse me of some schemes. Slaved away for me. Kaylee's voice trembled, but her resolve hardened. And what did I do all these years? Lie on the sofa. I worked, managed the house, tolerated your neglect. What neglect? He interrupted, advancing on her. I always treated you normally, provided cared. Something inside Kaylee finally snapped. You didn't even consider it necessary to ask my opinion about the apartment. Just decided everything yourself as always. And I was supposed to shut up and be happy. Yes, because I understand these matters better. He barked, his face reddening. You understand nothing about real estate, and you understand nothing about how to treat a wife, she blurted out, surprised by her own courage. Silas froze. His face turned crimson, veins bulging at his temples. Kaylee saw he was barely restraining himself from a full outburst. She had never witnessed him so flustered, so angry, and yet somehow so frightened, as if the ground were slipping from beneath his feet, just as it had for her. All right, listen. He spoke slowly, enunciating each syllable, as if addressing a slow-witted child. You eavesdropped on a conversation, understood everything wrong, and now you're throwing a tantrum. I'm explaining to you for the last time. I wanted to simplify the paperwork. It's standard practice. Then we would have calmly added you. But since you don't trust me, I don't trust you. Because I heard what you told Herr Richter, Kaylee interrupted, her voice firm. She doesn't understand anyway, none of her business. She just lives and enjoys what I provide. The silence that followed was so thick she could hear the distant thrum of the refrigerator. Silas stood, his mouth slightly agape. And for the first time in all their years together, Kaylee saw him utterly at a loss for words. I didn't mean that, he mumbled, finally, his bravado gone. What did you mean then? Kaylee stepped towards him, and now he retreated. Explain to me what you meant when you spoke of me with such contempt. When you discussed me with a stranger like something that understands nothing and shouldn't understand. Kaylee, I got heated. He tried to soften his tone, a desperate attempt at conciliation. Well, slipped off the tongue, it happens. You know I didn't want to offend you. Didn't want to. She felt tears welling but savagely held them back. She would cry later alone. Now she had to stand strong. Silas, you've offended me for years. Every day. With every word, every look, every decision you made for me. I endured. Hoped things would change. Thought it was temporary, that you were just tired at work, that you were stressed. But now I realize you simply don't respect me. Never respected me. That's not true. He raised his voice again, though less confidently. I respect you. Then why didn't you consider it necessary to tell me the apartment would be in your name? She spoke louder now, an unstoppable heat rising within her. Why hide it? Why discuss it with a stranger but not with me? Silas paced the room like a trapped animal. Then he stopped abruptly, staring at her, a new picture of passion in his eyes. "And where did you get the idea to learn the language anyway?" he asked. "And why were you silent about it? Why hide it? Maybe you have your own secrets." Kaylee flinched in surprise. She hadn't expected him to twist everything back on her. "I didn't hide it," she said, her voice softer now. "I just didn't say anything because I knew you would laugh. Like you laughed at floral design, at yoga, at everything that was interesting to me. Don't exaggerate." He waved his hand dismissively. "I just spoke the truth. You constantly start something and quit." "I quit because you killed any desire in me," Kaylee shouted, startled by the sheer force of her own voice. She never shouted. Never. "Every time I tried to start something, you said it was stupid, unserious, useless. You convinced me that I wasn't capable of anything, and I believed it. Believed that I was truly that weak, senseless, worthless." I didn't say that Silas objected, though his voice lacked conviction. Maybe not in those words, but the meaning was exactly that. Kaylee hugged herself as if suddenly cold. "You know what's scariest? I started believing I deserved this treatment. That I should be grateful you were with me at all. That without you, I was nobody." Silas was silent, looking at the floor. Kaylee waited for him to speak, to refute her, to prove her wrong. He remained silent. "Say something, at least," she asked wearily. He raised his head, and in his eyes she saw something new. Not just anger or irritation, but a profound confusion mixed with annoyance. "What do you want to hear?" he asked dully. "That I'm a bad husband, that I hurt you, fine. Maybe I did, but I tried. I worked like a dog to provide for us, so you had everything. Apartment, clothes, vacations. And now you say I don't respect you, money is disrespect." Kaylee shook her head. "Respect is when your opinion is asked, when your desires are considered, when you aren't discussed behind your back with contempt. How long are we going to go on about this?" He exploded again. "I explained already. It slipped out." Herr Richter asked himself. I answered without thinking. Without thinking, Kaylee smiled bitterly. When a person speaks without thinking, they speak the truth, what they actually think. "And you showed what you actually think of me." Silas clenched his fists. For a moment, Kaylee was afraid. What if he hit her? But he only turned around and walked to the window, staring out at the street. "You're exaggerating," he said without turning. "Making a mountain out of a molehill. I'm a good husband. I support the family. Don't drink. Don't run around. Many in your place would be happy." "Many in my place would have left long ago," Kaylee replied quietly. He turned sharply, something dangerous flashing in his eyes. "What did you say?" "I said many in my place would have left long ago." She spoke slowly, clearly, and with every word felt herself becoming stronger. Because living with a person who doesn't respect you, who considers you a burden, was simply unbearable. "Are you threatening me with divorce?" Silas stepped towards her, his face twisted in disbelief and rage. "Seriously, over one phrase you eavesdropped on, not over one phrase." Kaylee shook her head. "Over 15 years during which I was invisible in my own home. Over the fact that you intended to deprive me of a roof over my head. Over the fact that even now you don't understand what you did wrong." "I didn't deprive you of anything," he yelled. "I wanted to simplify the paperwork." "You wanted to deceive me," Kaylee shouted back, her voice breaking. "Because you thought I was stupid, that I wouldn't find out, that I wouldn't understand anything. Because you're used to me being silent and agreeing with everything." They stood opposite each other, both breathing heavily, both at their absolute limit. Outside the window, a horn blared. Children shouted in the courtyard. Life went on oblivious to the quiet collapse unfolding within their apartment. "I don't understand what's happening," Silas muttered finally. And for the first time in their entire conversation, confusion, almost helplessness, permeated his voice. "We lived normally. Everything was fine." "Where did all this come from? Everything was fine for you?" Kaylee said quietly. "For me? No. Not for a long time. I just kept silent. Endured. Hoped. Hoped for what? That you would notice me." She felt the tears breaking through unstoppable, and let them fall. "That you would remember who I was when we met. That you would love me again. But you fell out of love long ago. I just didn't want to admit it." Silas stood silently, his face slowly transforming. The anger receded, replaced by something else. Fatigue, guilt, or simply emptiness. So he said, finally his words like a verdict. "Maybe you're right. I don't know. I'm tired, Kaylee. Tired of work, of problems, of everything. And you? You were always somewhere in the background, convenient, familiar. I didn't think you were unhappy. Thought everything suited you." "Nothing suited me," she whispered. "But you didn't ask." He nodded, walked back to the sofa, and sat down heavily, covering his face with his hands. Kaylee stood in the middle of the room, utterly spent. There was no strength left to scream, nor to cry. Only a wrung-out emptiness remained, and a strange, crystalline clarity. "What now?" Silas asked, his voice muffled by his hands. "I don't know," Kaylee answered honestly. "But we won't be buying the apartment. At least not from Herr Richter, and not the way you wanted." He raised his head, looked at her. "So the deal is off?" "Yes," she said firmly, without hesitation. "I won't agree to the purchase if it's titled only to you. And anyway, I need time to think about us, about whether there's any point in continuing." "You want a divorce?" He stated it not as a question, but a grim conclusion. "I don't know what I want." Kaylee walked to the window, looked at the grey yard, the deserted playground, the empty bench where elderly ladies usually sat. "I only know that I can't go on like this anymore. I don't want to." "And what will you do?" A flicker of his old mockery appeared in his voice. "Leave rent a room on your salary. Live alone in some hole on the outskirts." She turned to him, saw him attempting to regain control, to resort to his old tactics, intimidate, demonstrate her helplessness without him. Before it would have worked. But not now. "Maybe so," she said calmly. "But it will be my hole, my life, my choice." Silas opened his mouth to object, then clamped it shut. He waved a dismissive hand, got up from the sofa. "Do what you want," he threw out. "I'm going to Dominic's, crash at his place, think things over too. And you think about your decisions here. Maybe you'll come to your senses." He strode into the bedroom. Kaylee heard the rustle of fabric as he pulled out a bag, the thud of clothes being thrown into it. Then he walked out without a glance in her direction and slammed the door. Silence. Kaylee stood by the window and watched him emerge from the building, get into his car, drive away. Only when the car disappeared around the corner did she allow herself to slide to the floor and finally completely break down. She cried for a long time, from pain, from relief, from fear of the future, from the bitter ashes of shattered hopes. The tears flowed endlessly until she thought she would drown in them. Then gradually the sobbing subsided. Her breathing evened out. Kaylee wiped her face with her sleeve, pulled herself up from the floor and walked into the bedroom. It was a mess. Silas had hastily yanked clothes from the closet, leaving the doors agape. Kaylee mechanically tidied, refolding the fallen linens, then retrieved her notebook and textbook from their hiding place. She sat on the bed, opening the notebook to the last page. Tomorrow she would call Herr Richter, explain the situation, apologize for the wasted time. And then she didn't know. But for the first time in many years, she felt that her life truly belonged to her again. She picked up her pen and on a fresh page wrote several sentences in the language she had secretly mastered. The words came easily, naturally. Ich bin stärker als ich dachte. Ich werde das schaffen. Ich werde Erfolg haben. I am stronger than I thought. I will handle this. I will succeed. Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery hues of pink and orange. Kaylee watched a silent witness to its daily farewell and thought that tomorrow would be a new day, the first day of her new life. The next morning, Kaylee awoke early, despite a fitful night spent replaying yesterday's devastating conversation. Silas hadn't returned, hadn't even sent a text. She rose, splashed her face with cold water, and met her reflection in the mirror. Her face was drawn shadows smudged beneath her eyes, but her gaze, it was different somehow, firmer, more resolute. She brewed a fresh pot of coffee and sat in the quiet kitchen, her phone clutched in her hands. She needed to call Herr Richter to explain why the deal was off. Her fingers trembled as she dialed the number. 1 ring, 2, 3. Yes. Listening. A familiar voice, laced with its gentle accent, answered. Kaylee took a deep breath and spoke slowly, carefully in German. Herr Richter, this is Kaylee Thorne. We looked at your apartment yesterday, my husband and I. A beat of stunned silence hung in the air. Then his voice thick with genuine surprise. Kaylee, you speak German? Yes. The admission long held brought a tiny release of tension. I'm sorry I didn't say so yesterday. Circumstances just turned out that way. I understand. He paused, the silence stretching. So you heard our conversation with your husband? Every word. Another longer pause. I'm very sorry, he said. Finally, his voice imbued with sincere regret. I shouldn't have agreed to such a scheme. It's just your husband was so persistent, and I thought, well, it's your family business. But I felt awkward. Very awkward. You aren't to blame. Kaylee looked out the window at the grey morning sky, a new lightness unfurling in her chest. I'm calling to say that we won't be buying the apartment. I'm sorry for the wasted time. Wait, Herr Richter said quickly. But you yourself. Do you want to buy it yourself? Kaylee was momentarily bewildered. What do you mean? Well, you liked the apartment I saw, and it really is good. Perhaps you want to buy it without the husband. I don't have that kind of money. She admitted, a fresh wave of realism washing over her. I work as an accountant. My salary is modest. I can't save up for such an apartment. And a mortgage, a loan, I don't know. I never handled this. Silas always decided everything. Listen. Herr Richter's voice softened, imbued with a deep, unexpected sympathy. I understand that things are hard for you right now, but if you truly need an apartment, let's try to find a way out. I can lower the price a little, and I can wait while you arrange a mortgage. I have time. I'm not rushing to sell so badly. Kaylee felt something warm, fragile, yet potent, ignite within her, the ember of hope. Why do you want to help me? Because yesterday when I looked at you, I saw my daughter. He sighed, a poignant, wistful sound. She was also in a similar situation a few years ago. Her husband also decided everything for her. Kept her in the dark, too. She left him, started a new life. She is happy now. And I thought that maybe I can help you at least a little bit, too. Tears pricked at her eyes again, but Kaylee held them back. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you very much. I'll think about it. I need time to figure everything out. Of course. Call when you're ready. And if you need help with documents or advice, ask. I know a good lawyer who specializes in such cases. They said their goodbyes. Kaylee placed the phone on the table, covering her face with her hands. Buy the apartment herself, alone, without Silas. It seemed unreal, terrifying, yet simultaneously so alluring. Her own housing, her own home, her own life. The following days blurred into a fog of uncertainty and quiet resolve. Silas returned 3 days later, a palpable gloom clinging to him. They spoke almost nothing, their interactions reduced to curt nods and monosyllabic replies. He arrived home late, left early, and slept on the living room sofa, a deliberate demarcation of their fractured lives. Kaylee avoided conversation, too needing space-time to weigh everything to crystallize her decision. She began to work in the shadows, researching with a fierce, quiet intensity. Online forums, legal aid websites, mortgage calculators, she devoured every piece of information. She studied divorce laws, property division, carefully analyzing her finances. The picture that emerged wasn't idyllic, but it wasn't hopeless either. In a divorce, she could claim half of their current apartment's equity. Selling her share to Silas or on the open market would provide a substantial down payment. And with her stable accountant's salary and solid work history, a bank would likely approve a mortgage for the remaining amount. The sheer audacity of it, the colossal undertaking, was both daunting and exhilarating. It meant severing ties with everything familiar, stepping into an unknown future alone. But the alternative, remaining in a loveless, demeaning marriage, was a fate far more terrifying. A week later, Kaylee called Herr Richter again. "I want to try to buy the apartment," she said without preamble, her voice steadier than she expected. "But I will need your help and your patience." "I have enough of both, Kaylee," he answered, a warm smile audible in his voice. "Let's meet. We can discuss everything." They met at a quiet cafe not far from Herr Richter's building. He arrived with a slim folder of documents and a neatly written phone number for a lawyer. Over steaming cups of coffee, they meticulously discussed all the details, the new reduced price, the timelines, the necessary procedures. Herr Richter had, true to his word, lowered the price by 10%, explaining that he genuinely wanted to help, that selling to a good person was more important than extracting maximum profit. "But first, you need to deal with your personal situation," he said cautiously, his kind grey eyes meeting hers. "With the husband. I don't want to intrude on your family life, but you understand that while you are married, any major transactions will require his consent." I know. Kaylee squeezed the coffee cup in her hands, her knuckles white. "I'm filing for divorce this week." Saying the words aloud was terrifying, yet simultaneously liberating, as if she had finally voiced a truth that had been festering inside her for too long. That same day, she booked a consultation with the lawyer Herr Richter had recommended, Ms. Evelyn Reed. Ms. Reed was a woman in her 40s, with intelligent, observant eyes and a calm, reassuring voice. She listened to Kaylee's story without judgment, then meticulously laid out a plan of action. "File for divorce," Ms. Reed advised. "Simultaneously demand division of property. You have a joint condo, which means you have a right to half. Your husband might try to contest, prove he contributed more, but in the absence of a prenup, the court will most likely divide it equally." "And how long will it take?" Kaylee asked, her pen poised over her notebook. 3 or 4 months, if without complications. Could be longer if he resists. Kaylee nodded diligently, taking notes. "And one more question." Ms. Reed looked at her intently, her gaze penetrating. "Are you sure? Sure you want a divorce, because it won't be simple. Emotionally, financially, morally. Are you ready?" Kaylee raised her eyes, meeting the lawyer's unwavering gaze. "Ready," she said firmly, a quiet strength emanating from her. "More than ready." She postponed the conversation with Silas until evening. She arrived home, cooked dinner out of habit, the aroma of a familiar meal filling the air. He showed up around 7:30, taking his usual seat at the table. They ate in tense silence, Kaylee's stomach tightening with every swallow. Finally, she put down her fork. "Silas, we need to talk." He raised his eyes, and in them she saw not anger, but a profound fatigue, a weary resignation, as if he had already anticipated her words. "I'm filing for divorce," she uttered, and her voice miraculously didn't tremble. "Tomorrow I'm going to a lawyer with the documents. I wanted you to know." He slowly lowered his fork, leaning back in his chair. "So you decided after all?" He didn't ask, he stated it as an undeniable fact. "Yes, and there's nothing that will make you change your mind." "No," he nodded, rubbing his face with his palms. "All right, maybe you're right. Maybe we really aren't on the same path. I thought about it all week. We've been strangers for a long time, Kaylee. I just didn't want to admit it." "I didn't want to either," she said quietly. "But now we can't pretend everything is normal anymore. Are we going to split the condo?" "Yes, I want to get my half." "Fine," he shrugged, a surprising lack of resistance in his voice. "Just let's not sell." "Okay, I'll buy out your share. We'll get an independent appraisal. I'll pay market value." Kaylee nodded. It was a reasonable offer, a testament to his weary capitulation. She was even grateful he hadn't started a scene. Agreed. They sat a little longer in silence, the quiet ticking of the kitchen clock, marking the end of an era. Then Silas rose, walked into the bedroom to pack. Kaylee remained in the kitchen, listening to his movements, the rustle of clothes, the opening and closing of drawers, the sounds of a life being dismantled. Half an hour later, he emerged with 2 large bags. "I'll stay at Dominic's for now," he said, stopping in the doorway, avoiding her gaze. "Then I'll rent something. Call if you need anything for the paperwork." "Okay." He stood for another moment as if wanting to add something, a final word, but no words came. Then he nodded a slight, almost imperceptible dip of his head, and left. The door closed quietly without a slam, leaving Kaylee alone in an apartment, now filled with a silence that was no longer oppressive, but somehow profoundly peaceful. The divorce process, as Ms. Reed had predicted, proved to be long and exhausting. Papers, court dates, property appraisals, endless negotiations. Yet, to his credit, Silas didn't actively obstruct the proceedings, agreeing to most terms with a weary pragmatism. 4 months later, their marriage was officially dissolved, the property amicably divided. Kaylee received a sum for her share of the condo, an amount that seemed vast to her, yet was only half of what they had accumulated over years of shared life. During these tumultuous months, Kaylee had transformed her life with astonishing speed. She secured a new job, finding a coveted vacancy at an international corporation, where her foreign language skills were not just valued, but essential. The salary was a welcome one, and a half times higher than her previous position. At the interview, when asked to demonstrate her proficiency, she spoke with a newfound confidence and fluency that clearly impressed her interviewer. "Where did you study?" The HR manager had asked, a genuine surprise in her voice. "Independently," Kaylee replied with a proud smile. "In the evenings for 8 months. Impressive." The woman nodded approvingly. "We value such determined employees." The new role proved to be everything she had craved. Interesting, dynamic, and challenging. Kaylee handled financial accounting for the company's European branches, communicated daily with foreign colleagues, and attended online conferences. For the first time in many years, she felt genuinely engaged, productive, respected. She was doing something important, something that validated her intelligence and ambition. Simultaneously, she navigated the labyrinthine process of obtaining a mortgage. The bank, impressed by her stable new job, declared income and impeccable credit history, approved her application with surprising swiftness. Herr Richter, true to his word, had waited patiently, periodically checking in with warm, encouraging calls. "How are things? Need any assistance?" "You are very kind," Kaylee had told him once, genuinely moved. "Not everyone would agree to wait so long." "I told you I'm not in a hurry," he had answered. Besides, I see how hard you are trying. It is worthy of respect. Finally, after months of relentless effort, everything was ready. Documents signed, money transferred, keys handed over. Kaylee stood in the empty apartment. Her apartment, and couldn't quite believe this was her reality. The huge windows, the bright, airy rooms, the sprawling view of the park below, all of it that now belonged to her, and to her alone. Herr Richter, with another act of kindness, had left some of the furniture as promised. The comfortable sofa, a sturdy dining table, the bed. The rest Kaylee bought, gradually, carefully, each piece, chosen with her newfound sense of self and taste. Hanging paintings, arranging books on the shelves, decorating the glass-enclosed balcony with potted herbs. Every small detail brought a surge of quiet joy, a tangible expression of her own choices, her own decisions. Her thirst for growth, unquenched, Kaylee enrolled in professional development courses, an intensive program on international financial accounting. Classes took place in the evenings, and on weekends, a vibrant new world of learning and connection. There, amidst fellow ambitious students, she encountered individuals who, like her, sought to evolve, to learn, to redefine their lives. During the third class, a man in his mid-40s took the seat beside her. He was tall, with a pleasant smile and observant, kind eyes. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair. "Of course." Julian, he introduced himself, extending a hand. "Kaylee." They fell into conversation after the lecture, discovering an unexpected kinship. Julian also worked in an international company, had recently navigated his own divorce, and was like her, attempting to forge a new beginning. They exchanged numbers, agreeing to study together for upcoming exams. Their study sessions soon became a regular fixture. Initially, their focus remained strictly academic, dissecting complex topics, sharing notes, debating case studies. But gradually, their meetings expanded beyond the library and the classroom. They began lingering in cafes after class, simply talking, exchanging stories, sharing the quiet triumphs and challenges of their changing lives. Julian was an attentive listener, a rare quality Kaylee had come to cherish. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer unsolicited advice. Simply listened, truly listened and understood. "You're amazing," he told her one evening, after Kaylee had hesitantly at first. Then, with growing confidence, recounted her journey. Not everyone would decide on such a thing. Starting everything from scratch at your age. At my age, she chuckled, a genuine light sound. "I'm 42. That's not so old." "Exactly." He smiled, a warm, reassuring curve of his lips. "That's the age when everything is still ahead. You understand that. But many don't. They get stuck in unhappy relationships because they're afraid of change. I was afraid too." Kaylee admitted a faint memory of that debilitating fear still clinging to her. But it turned out living in fear is even worse. Over time, their relationship deepened, moving beyond platonic friendship. Julian didn't rush things, didn't pressure her, simply was there. They walked in the park, went to movies, enjoyed dinners, in small, cozy restaurants. Slowly, tenderly, Kaylee learned to trust again, to open up, to allow herself the possibility of happiness once more. One evening, as they sat on her balcony, sharing a bottle of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in a kaleidoscope of colours, Julian gently took her hand. "I'm very glad I met you," he said quietly. "Me too," Kaylee answered, and felt tears welling. Happy tears this time. Tears of profound gratitude and burgeoning hope. A year had passed since the day she heard that fatal phrase in Herr Richter's apartment. A year that had utterly, irrevocably turned her life around. She stood by the window of her condo, gazing out at the city lights, thinking of the arduous path she had traversed. From a quiet, invisible wife, afraid to utter an extra word, to a self-confident woman who now commanded her own life. From a person who hid her hobbies and dreams to one who boldly pursued her goals. From one dependent on another's opinion to one who made her own decisions. The path had been difficult, fraught with moments of profound doubt. There were times she yearned to abandon it all, to retreat to the familiar, albeit unhappy safety of her old life. There were nights spent weeping from loneliness and uncertainty. Days when it seemed nothing would work out, when she felt too weak, too inexperienced, too ordinary to cope. But she had coped. Because she found a strength within herself she hadn't known she possessed. Because she believed in herself when no one else had. Because she chose to take a step into the unknown, despite the terror. And now, standing in her apartment in her own home, she understood that what had seemed like an end had in fact been a glorious beginning. The dawn of a new, authentic life. A life where she, and only she, chose her own path. The phone rang on the table. Kaylee picked it up. Julian's name illuminating the screen. "Hi," she said, smiling, the sound light and free. "Yes, I'm home." "Of course, come over. I'll be waiting." She hung up and looked out the window again. Ahead lay an entire life, her life, and she was ready to live it exactly as she chose. Kaylee's journey reminds us that the quietest battles are often the most profound, fought, not with weapons, but with resolve, resilience, and a stubborn belief in one's own worth. Her story is a testament to the fact that true invisibility isn't about being unseen, but about feeling unheard, unvalued, unacknowledged in the spaces that matter most. Many of us at some point have been Kaylee, clinging to a hope that slowly diminishes, allowing external voices to define our capabilities and limit our aspirations. But Kaylee's transformation underscores a powerful truth. The secret weapon isn't always a tangible object or a dramatic revelation. Sometimes it's the quiet cultivation of self, the hidden knowledge, the personal growth pursued in the shadows, that eventually becomes the very leverage needed to reclaim one's narrative. Her moment of clarity, spurred by a casual, contemptuous conversation, illuminates how quickly perceived comfort can turn into a cage, and how the familiar can become the most dangerous form of self-betrayal. Her courage to dismantle a life that was no longer serving her to step into the terrifying unknown is an inspiration. It speaks to the universal human yearning for respect, agency, and authentic connection. Kaylee learned that respect isn't given through provision, but earned through genuine regard for another's voice, dreams, and presence. Her journey highlights that it's never too late to redefine yourself, to cultivate new skills, and to build a life that is truly your own, filled with purpose and genuine connections. The greatest strength lies not in enduring what's comfortable, but in daring to forge a path that aligns with your deepest self, even when that path is steep and uncertain. If you saw yourself in Kaylee's story, in her quiet yearning for something more, or in her eventual triumph over a life that sought to diminish her, know that you are not alone. Your worth is not determined by another's perception, but by the quiet, unwavering truth within you. Discover that truth, nurture it, and let it guide you. Subscribe for more stories that explore the depths of human resilience and the power of personal transformation. May your own journey be one of strength, discovery, and profound peace.